Hello everyone, welcome to Birmingham Architectural Association's second last resilience event of the year with Urbanist platform founder CJ Obi, and how do we attract more Black people into the built environment. If this is your first time at a BAA event and you might not be familiar with us, we're a local branch of the Birmingham, a local branch of RIBA here in Birmingham, founded in 1874 and relaunched about 3 years ago. We're represented by architects, designers, interior designers, and we've got really good initiatives based on student ambassadorships and green environment initiatives. And we've just built up with a group of people that are really interested in and into architecture in the built environment. For the rest of the 2020, we have the following upcoming events. So we've got Simone de Gale, founder of SGA Architects, on our last resilience event, which will be on the 25th of November. We'll be announcing the calling or creative competition based on the home, so stay tuned to see whether you've won. We've also spent the last 7 months donating to the Architects Benevolent Society, and we've donated about £6,500. Other than that, if you're a student, on Friday, we've got an introduction into our student ambassadorship program, and do apply for this. This is going to be at the end of the month. So we've got a lot of exciting things coming up, and we just want to say that this has only been possible because we're supported by our partners and sponsors. So I'd just like to thank Alamure, Ibstock, Marley, Delta Light, FRA, Taylor Maxwell, Allgood, Armitage Shanks, Milliken, Kitchen Gallery, Altro and Rainers. Without further ado, let me introduce you to your hosts tonight, which will be having the conversation. So it's Birmingham Architectural Association's Kavita Dandy from Corstorphine and Wright, and Dion, an architect from Associated Architects. Thank you.
Good evening all. In this two-part event in collaboration with Urbanist platform, we're going to look at how we can explore attracting more Black people into the built environment. Aside from studying a course at universities, are there other ways that we can increase the selection of Black people into the industry? If we can't get equal representation in the industry, should we be looking at more ways to get Black people engaged in conversations about their local area, rather than solely from a career perspective? Myself and Dion will be talking to CJ about these issues. If at any point throughout the night you'd like to ask a question or share your experiences, please do so in the Q&A button below. Over to you, Dion.
Thanks, Kavita. So, having studied at urban planning, design and management at UCL, CJ has always had an interest in how we shape cities for future generations. However, after completing his studies, he quickly realised that some of the deep-rooted spatial problems in UK cities were indicative of the built environment industry. So, driven by a passion to make places more inclusive for people, through a more inclusive industry, CJ set up Urbanist platform to attract young people from all backgrounds. So, through in-depth interviews and a collaborative content with individuals, CJ aims to empower those in the industry whose values align with Urbanist platforms, subsequently inspiring the next wave of urban thinkers. So before I hand over to CJ, I'd just like to make the point that talking about race, it shouldn't be a taboo subject. We do events like this to try and break down those barriers, so don't be worried about asking any questions. We do, however, understand that it is a fairly sensitive subject at the moment, so it will be anonymous if you ask a question, so don't feel like we're going to read your name out. Just feel comfortable in having these conversations. So I'll now pass over to CJ. Thanks for joining us.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me. So yeah, look, I'm really delighted to be part of this event and to speak to you all about Urbanist platform and what we're trying to achieve overall. In keeping with this series and it being the theme of resilience, I wanted to tie in the subject matter with resilience and then give a really clear pay homage and pay respect to the thousands of people across the country who are desperately trying to get into the built environment as we speak, and are having to show resilience. So that's not just Black people, that's people from all sorts of background, people who are less privileged, people who are privileged. Everyone is having to be resilient right now. So I think that's in keeping with what I'm going to speak about with you all today. So to kick things off, I'm going to share the screen of what Urbanist platform is all about. I'm going to try and do this, guys, so do bear with me. So yeah, this is really, in essence, what we're all about. I set up Urbanist platform with the main aim of attracting people from all backgrounds into the built environment. So by built environment, we're very, very all-inclusive. We mean architecture, we mean urban design, we mean town planning, we mean surveying, we mean the whole spectrum. The Urbanist platform really is twofold. We are using content, we're creating content, all sorts of content, from articles, videos, interviews, to engage with young people across social media. But also, more specifically, we're going out and actually speaking to companies, established organizations within the built environment, and trying to get them to change their ways. If we look at the industry at the moment, I think we're pretty much all aware that it can be very one-dimensional. It's very male-led, it's very white-led, if we're allowed to say that. And I think what we want to do is we want to create more inclusivity, and we want to have the conversation about how we can change things. So we're providing consultancy services to those organizations to make sure that we're changing the situation at the top, but at the same time, we're also looking to attract and engage with younger people to get them into the industry. So the way we see it is that it's a cycle. So to start things off, we talk about culture. Now, when we talk about culture, it's not just saying that companies are going to try and change their culture and make an effort. No. We need to look at the evidence and hold these companies accountable. So what we're doing is we're sending D&I specialists to go on site, obviously not now because we're in lockdown, but speak to companies and do training with them, talk to them about inclusion awareness training, and also do cultural reviews, look at focus groups, look at desktop reviews, look at data analysis, really grabbing all that evidence to see what we can do to make those changes. We also look at the interview process. So some companies are actually really good at attracting quite a broad mix of professionals, but for whatever reason, actually offering those people seems to be a problem. So it's a little bit futile if we're attracting Black candidates to apply for a position, but we actually don't end up offering them a position. It's not really sort of solving the problem. So what we do is we look at what exactly is a problem in the interview process. Is it a case of some of the candidates from less privileged backgrounds lack the confidence? Is it imposter syndrome? Is it an unfamiliarity to the cultural environment? These are all the things that we can help the respective candidate with. Equally, it might be a problem on the other end. So is it a company culture problem that is making them not buy into the candidate? Is it an unconscious bias? What we also do is we therefore provide an independent diversity advisor to sit on the interview to make sure that we can get a detailed assessment of exactly what's gone wrong and what's gone right. Talent pool. Now, with our network, we're quite fortunate enough to be affiliated with a number of different organizations. So that includes the likes of Black females in architecture who we've got connects with. We've got, I wouldn't say we're partners, but we know them. We know Women in Planning. We know BAME in Property. We know quite a few different organizations in which we can look at the professionals there, and we can obviously have conversations and introduce respective people to organizations. There's also a thing that we're looking at in terms of emerging talent. So I'd say to a lot of prospective companies, one thing that we're introducing, which we have found has been very popular so far, is a process whereby in the penultimate year or the final year of university, we can actually give prospective employers, access to a candidate. And the advantage of that is they will basically have the early edge ahead of the competition in regards to basically offering someone. So rather than waiting for that person to finish university, they can build that connection with the said candidate from the final year or the year before they finish university. There's also a question of perception. Now, we know that we've seen this year with George Floyd and the incident that happened in America, that unfortunately a lot of companies score on goals when it comes to PR and delivering the right message. So we can also help employers with internal and external communication in regards to using the right terminology. I think this is a really important thing, because candidates, professionals are going to look at that now, maybe more than ever before. And if the perception of a company isn't right, then they're really going to struggle to grow and find the right talent. Then there's a question of retention. So as I said earlier, we might be in a position where we find companies are able to attract the right people, but if those people aren't staying and are leaving within a year or 18 months, then again, it sort of makes the whole process pointless, because the population or the numbers within your staff is still going to look quite bad. So what we do is we therefore provide online, face-to-face and blended programs and courses to help companies really feel like, or help people within those companies really feel like they're being stretched, they're being developed, and they're being given the right tools to get to leadership and director level. Finally, the last factor is surveys and reports. So we do a lot of internal analysis. We believe that surveys and reports, when done properly, are the perfect tool for measuring the feelings and opinions of your workforce. They can raise red flags about potential problems within your company that you're not aware of and might not have even thought to check. So we find this important because it's not just about collecting data, but it's what we can do to actually build on that data. We believe that representation is a measure of diversity, while the employee experience is a measure of inclusion. For this reason, again, we're able to send a specialist diversity and inclusion consultant, perhaps multiple, and provide interim expertise on consultancy basis for dedicated projects. Now, I think all in all, to summarize, we know that one key point is, from our recent research, around 70% of built environment professionals say they'll only consider applying to an organization with a public commitment to equality, diversity, and inclusivity. This says to me that really, if I sort of exit this now, sorry, there we go. Yeah, if I say we know now that it's not just a case of being diverse and inclusive for the sake of it and being ethical and moral. There's actually a competitive advantage here. There's actually an advantage that companies can see is valuable, financially. Not only are you trying to do the right thing, but it's now a thing where it's going to cost you if people can see that you aren't operating in the right manner. So I think all in all, it's a great time to be having these sort of conversations. The spotlight has been put on the industry more than ever before. And I think we've got to build on this momentum. We really do. What's important for me to really actually highlight is I wanted to make this event the theme on Black people. But equally, we know that there's other demographics that are equally facing the same problems. Maybe equally is probably not the right word, but there are other demographics that are facing the same problems. I don't feel apologetic for making this event centered around Black people, because I think it's a huge problem and I think we have to address it. And I think the way we address it is not to incorporate several cultures and demographics together. I don't think that's the answer. I think we try and solve the issue that we're facing at the moment. And then we look at that, we learn from what's gone right and what's gone wrong, and build on that to then help other diversity or inclusivity conversations, because there's a lot more to come. So I think that's pretty much it in terms of what I want to present. And I wanted to keep it quite short and concise in terms of my point, because I want to really build on this conversation by hearing perhaps what other people have to say. And as I said, I think this is something that this is really just the starting point of this topic and how we're going to address it. You know, this now has to be a conversation of let's take action. Let's not just highlight some of the problems and play the victim. You know, I think we're now past that. I think now let's look at the solutions. So I'd like to really pass it back to you, Dion, and see.
Yeah, thanks for that, Cesar. That was great. I suppose to kick off, you ended by saying how companies, you know, it's going to be at their detriment if they don't start being more inclusive. They're going to start losing money. But on the flip side, one of the things that I'd like to know is more the case of what are the deterrents from the other side in how people from ethnic minorities, what deterrents, what problems do they usually come up across? Is there any commonalities that you find that people from ethnic minorities find trying to get into the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm a classic case. You know, I studied urban planning design management at UCL about 10 years ago now, 11 years ago now, which is crazy when I think about it. And one of the main problems I found was, okay, I'm going to be very open with you here. Like, I'm CJ, and that's how I'm referred to. And I do feel like that's my name, but my Christian name, my birth certificate name is Chibueze Junior Obi. You know, and I know for a fact that when I put that on my CV, I didn't really get much in terms of response. It's sad, but that's the reality. When I changed it, and when I started putting CJ Obi on my CV, I started getting a little bit more engagement, which is weird, right? And to be completely frank, like, as I said, I feel like CJ is my name anyway, but I didn't know, no one really taught me the nuances and the intricacies involved in the recruitment process.
Yeah.
And you have to start navigating all of this yourself. Now, unless you've got a mentor or a role model or someone that's been in the same situation that can guide you, it's going to be a struggle. And the reality is, when I graduated from UCL 11 years ago, I didn't see anyone like me. I didn't see anyone that I could say, well, he did it, why can't I do it? You know, there's other people there are Black people that are excelling in the field. I didn't really see that. And I think now the good news is there are probably more people than there were at that time, or they're more visible than maybe there was at that time. And I think that's why it's important that, dare I say, platforms like Urbanist platform can really showcase that visibility. They can highlight people that are doing incredible things and try and match them up with some of the juniors that are coming through.
It's interesting you mentioned how, you know, that there was no one to look up to, and there was no one excelling in the industry that you could almost feel like, oh, that someone else has done it, why can't I do it?
Yeah.
Because I actually remember my first day of university. I remember walking to a lecture theatre and there was 250 people from architecture and interior design. And I walked into that lecture theatre and I didn't see one of a Black face. And I suppose keep on the topic of excelling, I would have really enjoyed I'm going to use the word, but it would have been nice to have the privilege to walk in and not even have to think about that. And the first thought would have been nice to have been, God, there's lots of people that are just like me. What can I do to excel? What can I do to stand out?
Yeah.
Because if you want to stand out as creatives, that's all we want to do. You know, we want to excel, we want to stand out from the crowd. But when I walked into that lecture theatre, the first thing I thought was, what can I do to fit in? And that can only be a recipe for averageness, really. Because I didn't want to stand out at all. I just wanted to fit in. I wanted to do anything that I could do to almost be under the radar, and not put my head above a parapet. I think that affected maybe my confidence to begin with.
Yeah. And
carry on.
I was going to say, what's interesting about that is some people use that as a positive, or they quite like that situation. And I agree with you. I'm the same. I don't want to feel like I'm the only person in a group of 250 people. Some people say, well, great, I'm going to stand out for selfish reasons. You know, it's like I can make it and I can be this sort of token. I don't want to have anyone else like me. So I think it depends on how you're you're built and your mentality. And quite like yourself, I wanted to almost have a collective feel of, well, you know, there's other people, there's an inclusive group of people that are prospering together.
I feel like, to an extent, a common theme of some of the conversations that we've had before and that you've had with Urbanist platform is people from a Black background, and then as well BAME backgrounds, when they go into universities and professional environments, in order for you to stand out, you almost have to do another level of standing out.
Yeah.
So to some of these kind of young professionals going into environments, whether it's university or professional environment, what advice would you give them? Because I think a lot of these stereotypes can come from the employers. So how would you break down some of these barriers to then?
Yeah, I think it's, oh, I can hear a bit of echo. Can you hear that? Okay, that's better. Yeah, so it's like there's two things I would say to that, Gavita. I think on the one hand, the reality is you have to be excellent. I think for a long time, you know, my parents always taught me, my dad especially, was like, you got to work twice as hard. I think that still counts, you know, in terms of having no reason to be faulted, because I don't believe in tokenism, and I don't believe in just being handed an opportunity just because you're BAME or because you're Black. I think you have to merit, that has to be merited, right? But at the same time, I think a non-Black person, and I've got quite a diverse group of friends, I'm quite fortunate to have that. You know, I've had conversations with white people, very open and candid conversations, where they say, well, this is a hard time to be white because you are less likely to get opportunities now because people are looking for diversity. So I think there's conversations to be had. I think we don't want to go too far the other way. We don't want to start handing out opportunities. And I would say to young Black people coming through and young people from Asian backgrounds and other minority ethnics, okay, you know, this is a time to really show your capability, and you might be noticed compared to what we were 10 years ago, but also be excellent in what you're doing. Don't take it for granted.
Yeah. Touching on what you've said then about, I suppose both of you have used the word BAME.
Yeah.
And something you said in your presentation was about terminology. And when you were offering these training sessions, you talk about terminology. Is there anything that you feel a lot of companies get wrong, or when it comes to this subject?
Yeah, I think the BAME one is an interesting topic, really, and I think that's where companies that, if I'm very honest with you, have slipped up over the last few months. And look, it's not, we're allowed to make mistakes because we're all learning as we go along, and I don't really hold them. I'm not going to point the finger and say that they're a bad company because they made the mistakes, but
even for individuals as well.
Yeah, exactly.
People are trying to navigate, you know, how to not be offensive at the moment.
Exactly. So the only way we're going to learn is to make those mistakes, and then we can look at them. So I think the BAME one is a good one to highlight, because you could, for example, there was an incident where, you know, we sort of had very open conversations with a company and a client, and it was a question of, well, how many Black people do you have? And it was like, well, we've got X amount of BAME people, so that's fine. And then it's like, well, no, how many Black people? And they said, what do you mean? And then you sort of start opening up that question, and I think that's the training aspect, because they don't, that company doesn't realize that they've sort of merged a collective group of ethnicity together. So it's slightly dangerous. It's how we do it. And I think that's the question. Look, there's not necessarily a problem if you're doing it as a term, as long as you know what you're doing and you know you're looking within it. And it's not lazy. It's not a case of, well, because as I said, the problem is if you dilute the percentage of Black people, or if you dilute the percentage of Asian people or other minority ethnics, you know, there has to be more clarity of exactly what each representation is. So I think that's been a big part of the training.
We've just had a question in from the audience, which kind of ties into what you were saying. What would you recommend to companies who want to actively hire more diverse staff but are in part of the country that may not have a mixture of demographics close by? So you often talk about how important it is to have this richness of culture and values, but if you simply can't represent that in your company, what do we do? How do we get over them?
I think that's a great question, actually, because one thing I've been looking at recently was, and this is part of the training that we give to companies and clients, is what percentage is there, amongst the cities that we're working in. So London, for example, I think off the top of my head, it's something like 13 to 15% of Londoners are Black. And when you keep that in mind, I think 4%, nearly 4% of the UK is Black. You want representation that's close to 4% across the country, because that's what the representation is in the UK. So you want that in your in the built environment. And then when you look at companies in London, for example, you want to get close to 13% Black people, because that's what London represents. Now, if we're looking at somewhere like, I don't know, I'm going to say a random city here, somewhere like Bristol, it's clearly not going to be as much as the 13%. But if you can get close to whatever percentage it might be, whether it be 6% or 5%, then great, right? So it's just at least trying to get what the population representation is. In terms of actual solutions, you might still say, well, they're just not out there. I think that there's a case to be had in terms of, well, what can we do to get people studying at those universities? What can we do? Because that's how it works, right? In terms of the actual ladder, it's getting them from school, getting them interested from school, getting them from school into university into those local areas. We're trying to get people actively changing their local area. So it doesn't necessarily mean they go to university to do that. Are there apprenticeships that we can offer those young people?
Would you say that the profession as it stands is attractive enough? So if we look at some of the rates of the number of Black people at the different levels, we've got 6.4% of the course apply for part 1, and then when you get to part 3, it drops down by almost a third, and you've only got 2.7%.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, right? So we know that, with respect, architecture is probably the most glamorous side of the built environment. I can say that as an urban planning graduate, and I'm going to probably get a lot of bad and nasty text messages from friends who are also planners, say, what are you on about? Why are you saying that? But I think the reality is the architecture initial attraction is there compared to maybe some of the other sectors within the built environment. Now, the drop that you just described is interesting. I think that can be put down to, one is the support there. Is there the support? Is there, like you say, is it interesting enough? Can we showcase stories? Can we showcase people who have made that transition? Can we share their stories and what they've done and shed insight on their perspective? What was involved to make that step up? And I think that's why I'm a great believer in online digital content. I think this is a time now more than ever to have platforms that shed awareness, that inspire, that are informative, and that are engaging. That's what we have to do, because we can't just rely on the idea of people going to university and coming out and being an architect or being an urban designer. That's not enough anymore. Like, we have to really visualize that whole process for people who want to know how it's done.
So keep on the subject of that, about sort of role models and mentors. Do you think mentorship is quite an important aspect of getting people to into the industry? And also the question linked to that would be, do you think it's more important to try and get more Black people into the industry, or people from ethnic minorities, or is it more about getting people to a higher level, like a senior level, or does one lead to the other?
Yeah, I think it's all of those things. I really do. I think the one thing I've made clear from the conversation I've had with a number of our clients and a number of companies is that this conversation about the lack of Black people in the industry is not going anywhere. It's something that we're taking very seriously. I feel like, as a Black man, I feel like I'm in a position to spearhead it, right? I can't talk on behalf of another ethnicity or another demographic. I can talk on behalf of a Black person, not every Black person, but I can say with confidence that this is a background that I believe I understand and I believe I can address. So that doesn't rule out other ethnicities. I think the conversation that what we learn and what we pick up from the conversations, we can certainly apply, and where necessary, use with other diversity conversations going forward. I think there's definitely going to come a time where some of our clients turn around to us and say, well, you've done this great job in transitioning us from a company that didn't really attract and retain Black people to suddenly having X, Y, and Z. Can you now help us with a neurodiversity conversation? Can you now help us with our lack of Asian employers? Can you, there's going to come a time where we will have to evolve, and we're quite prepared to do that. And when that comes, I won't necessarily be the person to have a direct conversation about sensitive issues. I will employ someone to do that, to be part of Urbanist platform that can have that conversation.
And have you got any stories that where you know mentorship has worked in that respect?
Definitely. I mean, I've seen, in terms of what we're doing at the moment now, we've got people who are at university in their second year or even first year, who we've connected with leaders and change makers in the built environment, whether it be town planning or architects, and they are finding it incredibly valuable, especially in a year like this one where there's a pandemic, and they're just getting that one-on-one in time conversation virtually, of course, but it's still really, really helpful, and they're very appreciative to have it. It's keeping them on track. So I'm being told on a regular basis that what we're doing is really, really helping.
Looking at some of the recent events and affairs that have happened, talking about just stemming on from what you were saying, do you expect this to have been a catalyst for the change in a positive way? Do you expect any of the events from this year, as you mentioned, what happened over in America with George Floyd? Do you anticipate 2021 to be the year that we start to see some change?
Yeah, I think I do believe that it's been it's almost been a silver lining of what's been a crazy year. The fact that because we've all been at home, because we've all been in lockdown, it's given people a lot of time to reflect and look at what's important to them. And I don't think there's any coincidence that because of what's happened with COVID-19 and then the George Floyd incident, suddenly it's all created this perfect storm, and bang, there's conversations about race and Black people in all sorts of industries, not just the building environment. It's not a coincidence. The light has been fully shone on the way companies and organizations have gone about their business. So in answer to your question, I definitely believe next year is going to be I think this has been a pivotal year, to be quite frank. I think this has really been the turning point. And I think next year, it's like, well, let's see some action now. And I think the companies that are, the good news is that companies have the appetite to change things. And that's always a starting point. Do they want to change? Now it's a case of, well, who can actually go out and help them do so? And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
So carry on, Kavita, sorry.
One of our audience members, Kai, just on what you were saying, I'd like to ask if you could offer any examples of positive actions that employers could make if they want to now to increase representation within their company.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm really happy to hear that kind of question, because again, it is about action, and it really does start. It's not just a case of, right, we're going to go out and recruit a Black person or Asian person. It's more than that. It's okay, we're actually going to put parameters in place to regularly have X, Y, and Z coming into the company when we recruit. So it's not just a quick fix, because as I said, this is something we want to see throughout over beyond the next few years. We want to sow the seed so it's a consistent change going forward. So I would say invest in the right channels, invest in apprenticeships, potentially invest in someone like you know, I don't want to plug Urbanist platform too much, but
invest in me.
Collaborate, you know, collaborate with a platform, because we will open the doors to a conveyor belt of brilliant talent on a regular basis. And I think that's what it is. It's a case of, the great thing about what we're offering is it's not just we're going to find people. It's we're going to find people, we're going to train people, we're going to give you the insight on how to operate externally and internally. We're going to, you know, give you the right training. We're going to inspire your recruits so they become leaders and directors. We're going to offer you the full repertoire. And I think it'll be wrong for me just to highlight this platform, because there's other organizations, social enterprises out there that are actually starting from the grassroots levels and actually going out to schools and finding youngsters and getting them talking about architecture and the built environment. I think we have to shout out those organizations as well. Companies like Power Out of Restriction, Power Out of Restriction, Pathways to Property, Regeneration, Greenery. There's a couple of social enterprises out there that are really trying to connect youngsters into the built environment. So, you know, collaborate with those ones as well.
I suppose you're sort of almost asking organisations to get in touch with you. Does that take a certain level of acceptance that that there is something wrong within that organisation and they want to change? But is there any way of almost changing the companies that don't recognise that they even have an issue in the first place?
Yeah, I mean,
it's a difficult one, because I suppose, do you do any work with people who might be at universities and then can change that from bottom up? Because you're almost asking for a top down where organisations get in touch with you, if that makes sense.
So are you saying, do we work with people that can?
Well, you're asking for organisations to get in touch with you, but they almost have to accept that there's a problem to even begin that process, don't they? And want to change it. So how do you bridge that gap?
Yeah, I get what you're saying, actually. So, you know, are there companies? I mean, this is it's a tough. I mean, if you've got a solution, let me know. But I think the reality is, the good news is, a lot of these people are companies we know already. So one of the things that maybe I've sort of not clarified as much is that I've been doing recruitment. So I graduated as an urban planner, but didn't actually end up being a planner. I actually did recruitment for several years, and recruitment specifically in the built environment sector. So the good aspect is that a lot of these companies are clients already. So it's a warm conversation. Yeah. It's not like I'm going out cold calling 1,000 companies. A lot of these people are people that we know already. So it's okay, we trust you. You're going to have a conversation about what we need to be doing going forward. We're not quite sure we needed it, or we didn't know we needed it, but we've heard about it. And because we trust you, we'll listen to you. So that's kind of the conversation at the moment. In terms of other companies maybe that we don't know, honestly, Dion, I think they'll get left out, because I think we're at a point where this is not going to be an option, really, to sort of operate.
That does lead on to the point you were saying, doesn't it? Is that these companies that will be left out, as you say, you mentioned in your presentation that there probably could even be financial repercussions for not thinking this way. What examples can you give about how there's a link between diversity and you know, how successful your company would be?
Yeah, sure. So I give you an example. It's one that we spoke with had a requirement for, was it months? In fact, it turned into nearly a year, and it was because it was just a very narrow-minded way of thinking, that they believed that they wanted someone who was in the private sector for 20 years, had this amount of experience. Basically, the way they described it, the idea of them finding someone who was non-white was extremely low, right? So if they had broadened their mindset a bit and actually opened the pool of talent that they would consider, they would have filled the role. And it became a really glaring problem, and they were losing out because they were losing business. They weren't able to pitch for specific types of work, whereas we had candidates that could do that job, that would have won that business. And that was really when the penny dropped, that actually you're not hiring someone because you think in your mind you know what you need, but you don't necessarily know what you need. You think you know what you need, or what you need is out there, but you're just not considering them because of their background.
To CJ, so organisation cultural development is inherently difficult to measure quantitatively. What prescriptions do you implement, into benchmarking and monitoring these processes? So obviously, as you say, once you've got them in, once you've got Black people in, you've got that diversity. It's maintaining it, and it's how do you maintain it, quantify it?
Yeah, sure. So that's definitely the surveys. Yeah, sorry, that's the surveys and report cycle slice that we presented. That is, if I'm being very open and honest with you, that's something that whoever asked the question that I'd love to share more information with after, because that's what our D&I specialist sorts out. You know, I leave it in her capable hands, but it really does involve specific reports and surveys, which we then present to the company afterwards. So it's a full-on assessment, and it can be for a period of time. It can be, you know, a specific portion of people, but it's something that the woman who we've got, Hayley, she's been doing it for several years across different industries. So these are proven methods that have been very effective.
So going back to, there's been a question come in that sort of touches on something we spoke about previously about language and how language is very charged. Is there a best source to find the most up-to-date terms as to not offend someone? So have you got any recommendations of where people can go and read or follow? I suppose.
Yeah.
I think I know what the person is trying to ask, essentially, where can we go and find out this information?
No, I get it. Do you know what? It's a really good point. And I respect the fact that actually, is there a gap for someone to create a website to say terms you use and don't use, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's a way of solving the problem, but I don't know if that exists. But what I can say, again, that's a service that we offer, because we know that a lot of companies are walking on eggshells in terms of what they should say and what they shouldn't say. So we can help with that, because we have comms professionals that will advise on a strategy, whether it be short term or whether it be long term. You know, these are the terms to use. So, and then again, the problem is a lot of these things are changing so much, and they're constantly they change so much. So we're on top of it, and we know that we've got to be on top of it if we're going to advise clients. So yeah, again, it's another service that we offer in our repertoire.
I suppose if people are coming to you and wanting to address that, that's almost a positive change, and it's almost positive that people are aware of being sensitive, and it's almost they've identified the issue and they're trying to be sensitive about it. I think just to kind of finish, could you tie in a conversation about the current pandemic and whether it's had any silver linings on attracting Black people into the profession and the built environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall it definitely has. You know, I've seen more conscious efforts now to at least have the conversation about what is our staff personnel like, what are the numbers of Black people, or do we think we need to invest more in trying to find people? So as I said earlier, there's definitely a conversation and an appetite to get more Black people in, which is what we wanted, right? That's a great thing. Now it's a case of, let's not just make this a fad. Let's not make this a trend, right? Let's keep this conversation going. And how can we do that? And how can we support these companies that are trying to make an effort to get these people? If 5 years from now, we're seeing 5 to 6% Black directors across our architecture and planning firms, wow, you know, that would be an amazing thing. that would be such an improvement compared to what we're seeing at the moment, which is minimal. So it doesn't matter how or why their intentions might be to get those people, but as long as we're seeing it, I think that's the most important thing, and we're having those conversations now. So I'd say to people, appreciate everyone that's been on this call. I'm really happy. I love having conversations about this. It's something that I'm really, really passionate about, because I feel like it's something that I can relate to as someone that graduated in this industry, and I've seen the full cycle of people that have come and gone and left the industry because they didn't feel that their attention or their needs were being served. So I'm happy to have this conversation with people. We have it as a company, as a consultancy, and we do want to directly go in and help companies and train companies and give them the right expertise. But I'm also happy to have the conversations. And like the last question that came in about terminology, that's something that we can have webinars and speak to companies and say, look, this is what you should do. This is how you should approach it. So we want to be able to, if there's an awkward conversation to be had with companies, with their staff, they don't know how to have it. That's what we're trying to bridge that gap.
Yeah, thank you very, very, very much. I think there's a lot to take away, and yeah, generally really interesting talk. I think I don't know, one more question because it's just come in, but would you think part of the problem is that there's a lack of projects aimed at the ethnic minorities, such as housing development? So do you think the construction industry might have a lack of maybe employees because there's not projects aimed at that in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one because I think that there's several examples across. If I look at the built environment, I look at regeneration that goes in some of our big urban cities and areas. Let's take, for example, London or Birmingham. We know that you're going into communities where there is a Black demographic or a ethnic minority demographic, and you are affecting those communities with the development that you're looking to propose. So with that in mind, we should really have representation that reflects those communities. Like I don't know if I can honestly say that there's projects out there that doesn't necessarily relate to minority ethnic. So do we need those employees? I think there's enough out there for us to really justify it. I don't know if I quite got the question right, but I hope that answers it.
I think we're getting more and more questions in now. So touching back on your webinars, someone just asked, are you happy to have webinars with universities, societies, or classes? So does it have to be organisations, or even would you go to universities as well?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. We're definitely happy to have it with universities. Absolutely. Like I said, I mean, we believe that in some locations within the UK, universities are going to play such an important role. They really are. So we know that there's value in making sure that the universities are, well tuned on what's going on and how to approach things.
Yeah. So I think you've it's been really insightful. So I'd like to thank you on behalf of the BA for taking part in this. It's obviously a very poignant sort of topic and conversation. It's sensitive, and I'd like to echo your point in that these subjects shouldn't be taboo. These should be conversations that we should be able to have without feeling like we step on eggshells. And I echo the point of just get in touch with people like yourself if you want to have those conversations and learn.
Thanks, Dion. Thanks, Kavita. Appreciate it. It's been really good having this conversation with you, and let's keep it going. Let's build on the momentum.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Dion. It's been really insightful, and it's almost quite refreshing to be able to talk so openly and so honestly about a subject that, as Dion said, sometimes it can be seen as a taboo subject. But yeah, it's great to just almost start the momentum with conversations like this. I think that's all the questions from me, Dion, unless you've got a final one.
No, so all I'd say now is just, don't forget to keep up with all things BAA, and we've got some great events coming up as well.
Yeah.
So the next Resilient event is going to be with Simon De Gale, founder of SGA Architects, and that's on the 25th of November. So if you could sign up for the Eventbrite and stay tuned, but also for the winner of the Cornwall Creators based on home.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was fantastic, and I personally learned a bit more, and I think actually there's an opportunity now where there is more conversation and more easily inclusive conversation with everyone. Now we're online as well, so that people aren't so bubbled up. But I just wanted to thank again the sponsors, which are Alamure, Ibstock, Marley, Delta Light, FRA, Taylor Maxwell, Allgood, Armitage Shanks, Milliken, Kitchen Gallery, Outro and Rainers. And I want to say a massive thank you to CJ and also Kavita and Dion. It was a fantastic conversation. And thank you for sharing your website as well.
Thanks all. Appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Take care. Enjoy the rest of your evening.